Hello and welcome to our next Games That Weren't Christmas update of 2024, where today we'll be taking a look at some behind the scenes documents from the late Archer Maclean when he was producing IK Plus back in 1987 on the Commodore 64. On the request of Chris Wilkins of Fusion Retro Books, we have preserved many work discs of Archer, but also scanned in a plethora of documents and notes which Archer created as he developed his games. These give a fascinating insight into Archer's process and attention to detail. This video highlights a sample of some of these documents, but not everything can be shared unfortunately, as much of the documentation consists of source code which we are not allowed to put up. However, we can show you some of the early thoughts and concepts that led to the game that we all know and love today. These can also be found on our page, which is linked within the description of this video. First up, the following documents here are the earliest notes we could find in relation to the development, and seems to be the point where Archer first began the process for creating IK+. Dated the 23rd of October 1986, Archer has clearly been thinking about building upon the success of International Karate by introducing a third player, thinking how it could work technically. This is followed by some extra steps which Archer now needs to think about next to try and take the game forward and come up with additional ideas to further enhance the game and make it something that stands out from the original. The following images showcase Archer's early thoughts and process into creating the iconic graphics for the game, including the logo itself. This is followed by ideas for the background in the game. This time Archer was to settle just on the one background, but with many different flourishes and extra details. This first screen showcases some small visual ideas that he had overall. This is followed by concept sketch backgrounds as possible ideas for the game. This includes a bridge approaching a castle, and then a Japanese building background, which perhaps was a bit too similar to the first game background. And then concluding with an animated waterfall scene overall. All ideas that were kind of dropped overall. Then we get scenes which look very familiar, but are not quite like the final background. Here we can see the sunset and the mountains at the side, followed by a segment with the tree in the background, but there's still some details missing that we would see in the final version. It seems clear that Archer was keen to put in a Japanese torii gate at some point in his design, and we can see some of the variations here being thought of and how it could look, included within his initial design with the tree and the sunset scenes. Here we can see a concept sketch which brings many of those different ideas together, but still isn't anything like the final version. Here we have the variation of having the sunset but with the tree dead center and the torii gate off to the right of the screen. This is then followed by more refinement of the torii gate graphics in a lot more detail. Here is some graphics that we extracted previously from Archer's discs, and this shows a small glimpse of an early test of the C64 graphics, just to see how his initial ideas would look. Then also in the collection were a few sheets where Archer was playing around with a logo for his Arena graphics company, showcasing different ideas, but for a logo that never actually featured in the final game at all. There was a lot of thought put into the different moves and animations within the game, and here we can see some of Archer's notes where he was trying to work out those moves and how they would all fit together. Followed by some animation frames carefully thinking out how the backflip animation could work overall. It seems that Archer broke down his old animation routine from the original game to then try and improve it for IK+, producing a complex flowchart to outline everything of what he did in the original game, so maybe he could see for opportunities to make various improvements, especially when trying to introduce the third player. Not only was Archer thinking a lot about having the right background and decent animations and moves, but he was intent on creating lots of little flourishes in the background. You may think they were just a final thought and added for polish, but there was clearly plenty of planning and ideas for the features that would try and distract you in the background of the game. But most of all, there was a huge amount of effort put just into trying to perfect the sunset and the ripple effect that you see within the game, and as you can see from these screens now. Something that perhaps many of us were amazed by at the time, but didn't quite realise how much time and thought Archer had put into it, and now we do. Many of the pages show various ideas that were tried and then scrapped, evolving over time until we ended up with the effect that we all know and love. Unsurprisingly, a lot of thought also went into the bouncing ball bonus game, trying to get the bounce routine working in an effective way and to produce a suitable challenge for the player overall. Unfortunately, we can't share all of the source code with you, but here are a few segments to give you an idea of the type of content that was present. There were many different printouts of the source code and routines, where Archer would make written notes and various debug statements along the way. There are a few pages here with some of his notes and thoughts, and also many pages with handwritten code and notes. Here, for instance, we can see Archer breaking down the high score messages, suggesting to press certain keys to do certain effects within the game, followed by how some of the judge messages were actually encoded within the source code. As well as code, there were pages and pages of notes discussing bugs and also parts for the game, including the pause mode with all the firefighters moving and how that could work overall. There were notes about sprite priorities, message displays, and also further flourishes and ideas as well. There were also notes about the animation routines and memory mapping and various things that still needed to be done for the game. One of the particular things that made me smile though was seeing these moments of Archer kind of berating himself for when he got things wrong within his code. And he did this kind of every time he found a bug, or kind of found something wrong within his code that he felt that he should have got right first time. I mean, this is great. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I would do at work when I'm doing my own coding. And you know, many of you might do exactly the same thing too when you're writing your notes, and it's kind of interesting to see the frustrations that Archer had as he was producing the game. And there was quite a lot of this throughout all of his notes overall, and it was quite funny to see. Unfortunately, there wasn't much correspondence between Archer and Rob Hubbard for the music, at least not in the documentation that we had, though there were some bits and pieces. Firstly, we have about ensuring that Rob was paid for his work, and work overall that Archer was very happy with. Then there was some thoughts and feedback from Rob's initial submission and questions for Rob about his music routine. Unfortunately, I was hoping that we might find some letters from Rob to Archer along with the discs that he originally sent, but unfortunately there was nothing within the notes that we found. But if anything does turn up, then we'll try and add it to the website. So as we conclude our look at some of the materials from Archer's collection, as the game drew close to completion, Archer began to send out playtester documentation, we assume to the press and to friends in the industry. Archer clearly wanted to make sure that the game was perfect before handing out the masters to Activision, and was very meticulous as always, as you can see. To conclude, many of you may remember the Commodore User preview of IK+, which was a huge exclusive at the time, and here we can see Archer writing to Mike Patterson with the article submission and screenshots, it seems, along with a light-hearted joke about making a contribution to his fund. This is followed by a thank you slip from Mike himself back to Archer, and which we found further on within his archive. And that concludes our look at some of the materials that have been preserved from Archer Maclean's collection. You can find these on our page within the video description. It is a huge thanks to Chris Wilkins at Fusion Retro Books for allowing us to preserve the materials and to be able to share some of these with you today. Many of the documents can now be found at the Retro Computer Museum in Leicester, which I highly recommend you check out sometime if you haven't already. Until the next video, see you soon and take care.